Alright, let's talk about America after World War II. Picture this, the war ends, and America is basically the last superpower standing, or at least the one with the fewest broken limbs and an actual working economy. So what does it do? It launches, metaphorically speaking, Operation Total Wave America. This wasn't an official military plan with a cool code name, more like a grand sweeping ambition. The idea was to spread American influence, its values, its money, and its way of life across the entire globe like an enormous, unstoppable wave. It was born from a position of unprecedented strength and arguably a belief that the American way was the best way for everyone, whether they'd asked for it or not. It was ambitious, to say the least. Now you might be thinking, a wave? That sounds a bit dramatic, John. And yes, it is, but it's also quite fitting. The goal wasn't just a little ripple, it was a total wave designed to reshape the world in America's image. Think of it like a surfer who not only wants to ride the biggest wave but also wants to control the ocean itself. This wave was meant to carry democracy, capitalism, and American culture to every shore. The intention, at least on paper and in many hopeful speeches, was to create a more stable, prosperous, and peaceful world, guided, of course, by the steady hand of Uncle Sam. It was a vision of global leadership or global dominance, depending on who you asked, and it set the stage for decades of American foreign policy. How did this immense wave even begin to form? Well, after World War II, most of the world was in ruins. Europe was shattered, Asia was reeling, and America, relatively unscathed on its own soil, possessed incredible industrial might and economic power. It had the factories, the money, and the military might. This unique position allowed the United States to project its power outwards in a way no nation had quite managed before. The wave started building with the Marshall Plan, rebuilding Europe, but also subtly tying European economies to the US system. It was a powerful combination of generosity and strategic self-interest, the initial surge of this massive global current. The initial intentions behind Operation Total Wave America weren't necessarily all nefarious, at least not for everyone involved in shaping it. There was a genuine desire among many to prevent future world wars, to promote freedom, and to help rebuild shattered nations. The thinking was that a world built on American principles would be a safer world for America, and perhaps for others too. They saw themselves as offering a better alternative to the recently defeated fascism and the rising threat of communism. So the wave carried with it ideals of democracy and human rights, alongside economic systems and military alliances. It was a complex mixture of idealism and cold, hard power politics from the very start of its journey across the global ocean. So, how exactly did America make this total wave so, well, total? It wasn't just by wishing really hard. They had a rather impressive toolkit, a set of powerful instruments to project their influence. First up, the most obvious one, the military. After World War II, the US military didn't just pack up and go home. Oh no. It established a vast network of military bases around the world, hundreds of them, in dozens of countries. It was like America decided to become the world's resident security guard, setting up shop on practically every corner. This massive military presence meant America could respond quickly to threats, real or perceived, and it sent a very clear message. We're here, we're powerful, and we're watching. Then there's the economic power, the big green elephant in every global room, the US dollar. After the war, the dollar effectively became the world's main currency. Most international trade, especially for important things like oil, was priced and paid for in dollars. This gave the US enormous leverage. Think of it like this. If the world is a giant arcade, the US owned the company that made all the tokens. You want to play? You need American tokens. This exorbitant privilege, as one French politician famously called it, allowed America to finance its ambitions, including that very large military, often more cheaply than other nations. It also meant the US could use financial sanctions as a powerful weapon. And let's not forget the cultural wave, the soft power that often goes underestimated but is incredibly pervasive. We're talking about Hollywood movies, American music, blue jeans, and fast food. American culture was exported everywhere, carrying with it images of freedom, coolness, and prosperity. Suddenly people in far-flung corners of the globe were dreaming of driving a Cadillac down Route 66, even if they didn't have roads. This cultural yushutsu, that's Japanese for export by the way, just sprinkling in some international flavor, created a sense of familiarity and often admiration for America, making its harder power plays sometimes easier to swallow. It was influenced by aspiration, finally a more modern tool but one that significantly amplified the wave, the internet. Yes, the very thing you're probably using to watch cats fall off things right now. It was born out of US military research and then commercialized, spreading American technology and communication platforms globally. While it connected the world in unprecedented ways, it also became another channel for American ideas, businesses, and yes, influence to flow. Companies like Google, Facebook, or Meta, whatever it's calling itself this week, and Amazon became global giants, further embedding American technological standards and norms worldwide. This digital tide became a crucial part of maintaining and expanding that tidal wave. Now, when a giant wave, even one carrying shiny things, crashes onto different shores, not everyone is thrilled. In fact, some people get thoroughly soaked, and not in a fun beach party way. Operation Tidal Wave America, for all its stated good intentions, inevitably caused significant problems around the world. The sheer force of American military, economic, and cultural presence often felt less like a helping hand and more like a heavy boot. This naturally led to resentment. In many places, US support for certain regimes, often undemocratic ones as long as they were anti-communist or pro-American business, bred anger and fueled the rise of anti-American groups and extremist ideologies who saw America as an imperial power. As a result, many countries didn't just passively accept being part of America's global ocean, they started to push back. Some nations actively sought to create alternatives to American dominance, forming their own alliances or strengthening regional blocs to counterbalance US power. Think of movements towards de-dollarization, where countries try to trade using other currencies to reduce their vulnerability to American financial pressure. It's like countries saying, "Thanks for the tokens, America, but we'd like to build our own arcade now, maybe one that doesn't always have you winning every prize." This desire for greater autonomy has led to a more multipolar world, where other power centers are emerging and challenging the idea of a single dominant wave. This pushback, combined with some questionable American actions on the world stage, like controversial wars or perceived double standards on human rights, significantly damaged America's reputation. The image of America as a benign leader, a beacon of freedom, began to tarnish for many. Trust is a fragile thing, and once broken, it's incredibly hard to repair. Instead of being seen as the world's problem solver, the US was increasingly viewed by some as a source of instability, or as a nation primarily interested in its own narrow interests. This erosion of trust has made it harder for the US to lead on global issues, even when its leadership might genuinely be needed. The lifeguards started looking a bit too much like a shark to some. Furthermore, the American wave paradoxically helped create its own competition. By promoting global trade and in some cases investing in other nations' development, even if for its own strategic reasons, America inadvertently helped foster the rise of new economic powers. Countries that were once recovering from war or were developing economies eventually grew strong enough to become significant players on the world stage themselves. China is the most obvious example, but other nations too have risen, creating a more complex and competitive global landscape. The student in some ways became the rival. This wasn't necessarily a bad thing for the world, but it certainly complicated America's tidal wave strategy. While Operation Tidal Wave America was reshaping the globe, it was also having some pretty serious effects back home. Maintaining that massive global presence, the military bases, the foreign interventions, the economic influence, is incredibly expensive. Decades of this, including long and costly wars in places like Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan, led to what many call war fatigue. Americans grew tired of endless conflicts with unclear objectives and mounting human and financial costs. The sheer amount of money poured into defense and foreign policy also meant less was available for problems at home, leading to debates about wasteful spending and national priorities. It turns out, trying to be the world's everything takes a toll on your own house. And then there's the issue of freedoms. In the name of national security, especially after events like September 11th, there was a noticeable erosion of certain civil liberties within the United States. Increased surveillance, controversial laws like the Patriot Act, and a general climate of fear sometimes made it feel like the country was sacrificing its own founding principles in the quest to project power abroad. This didn't sit well with many Americans, who began to question whether the price of being a global superpower was too high if it meant losing freedoms at home. A government that constantly looks for enemies abroad can sometimes start seeing them everywhere, even among its own citizens. This constant state of global engagement, coupled with the domestic consequences, has also led to deep divisions and a growing mistrust in government. Americans became increasingly polarized over the country's role in the world. Was America a force for good or an overreaching empire? Disagreements over foreign policy bled into domestic politics, making it harder to find common ground on anything. Events like the January 6 Capitol riot, while complex, undeniably showcased a profound level of anger, disillusionment, and mistrust in governmental institutions among a segment of the population. It was a shocking visual of just how turbulent the waters had become within America itself. So, this brings us to the rather uncomfortable final question. Has Operation Total Wave America, this grand, decades-long project of shaping the world, ultimately become America's biggest problem? Has the relentless effort to project power outwards inadvertently weakened the nation from within and diminished its standing in the eyes of others? It's a critical question because a wave that's too big or one that has lost its direction can easily turn into a destructive force not just for those in its path, but also for the source that generated it. Perhaps the biggest challenge for America now is figuring out how to navigate the very waters it helped to churn up so dramatically.